Students around the world are finishing their qualifications so they can get ahead in life and make their contribution. If you are studying, researching, or thinking about it, you will need practical tips, techniques, coaching, and support to help you get finished and be successful. I'm Peter Alkemer, the Student Success Coach, and welcome to the podcast. Each episode, I interview successful students and leaders in education so that you will learn everything you need right here. You will learn about writing, completing your thesis and other projects, planning, discipline, how to get more done, supervisors, getting published, getting finished, how to have the right discipline, and many other aspects of student life. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or any other podcast platform, please leave a rating and a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Either way, please get in touch and let us know what you think of the show and what you want to hear more of. Please always check the show notes for links to courses, material, and plenty more so that you can use what you've learned in each episode, take action, and achieve your student success. Please also join the Student Success Coach community in our exclusive members-only Facebook group where I post regularly and you can interact with fellow students just like yourself. Remember, you can't do this alone, so reach out, get involved, and take advantage. It's my commitment to your success. Now for this week's episode.
Michelle, so good to have you on the show today. I'm so excited to catch up with you after, it's 2 decades, I think, since we were at school together. And I've just been following your awesome journey, having moved to the States and all your adventures and finding time to study and achieve, student success. And that's really what this podcast is all about. So people listening today are just, looking for that inspiration and those tips and encouragement and support, in their own studies. And I'm keen to ask you all about, your academic journey. But before we get there, maybe just, some background. I mean, you've traveled extensively. You've obviously moved over to the States from South Africa. So just fill us in on your life and bring us up to speed with everything you've been busy with in a couple of minutes, if possible.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if I can do 26 years in 2 minutes. But yeah, we immigrated in 94. I ended up graduating from the University of Georgia, which is in Georgia, as the name says. Much like the rest of my generation, started working immediately after graduating from college. After 9/11, I was moved to do something for the United States. So I enlisted in the U.S. Army. That was in 2002. Even though I had an undergraduate degree, I wasn't yet a U.S. citizen. So I enlisted as a specialist and ended up having a job as basically working in public affairs and engineering. So would be able to operate a technical side of a radio studio or a TV studio. In 2004, I got a phenomenal job with a company called Curran Downey, which was just voted this year's world's best luxury tour operator by Travel and Leisure magazine. And so started working for them in 2004 while still being a U.S. Army reservist. And in 2005, I was deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as a broadcast technician. And it was there I met my husband, who's also in the military, and we fell in love underneath some palm trees in Baghdad. And when I moved back, I ended up moving to California. And so since then, I've lived the life of a military spouse while working simultaneously as a remote employee for Curran Downey, and have lived in California, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, California, Kansas, back to Tennessee. So this is where we are today. And in the interim, got married, have a wonderful 18-year-old stepson, had 2 children, we're on our 3rd dog, and I think our 7th house. So that's me in 2 minutes.
Wow, that is impressive. I must say, Michelle, that's the best introduction we've had on the show so far. So well done. And gee, I just will have to go back over the recording for my show notes so that we can just really give everybody that insight. So Michelle, yeah, I mean, just so many questions coming out of that, but I guess your undergraduate studies at University of Georgia. Maybe just give us a sense of that and what you studied, and how that went, and what sort of direction that took you on initially.
Sure. So I actually started my my undergraduate, or my degree, at a small, at that stage it was a small university called Kennesaw State University, and it was only after a year of being here, so we didn't actually have the financial prowess to actually afford for me to pay for me to go to university, so I was able to get a track scholarship. So I ended up going there for 2 years as a cross-country athlete, which paid for my schooling, which is fantastic. And once we were able to establish ourselves and build up a bit more money, I was able to transfer to the University of Georgia. Each state has fantastic programs, and Georgia has what's called the Hope Scholarship. So if you maintain a certain GPA or grades, you can apply, and the state will actually pay for you for university. You just have to prove that you're a resident. So that's what I did for my last 2 years, so that I could get through school without having student loans and various things like that. So that's where I graduated from UGA. To be honest, I was 17, 18 years old. I really didn't know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. I've always been interested in people and what makes people do certain things. And so I ended up doing psychology, which is very much a general degree. I think a lot of us undergraduates who are a little lost as far as what path they want to take. It's a good generalist degree. And I enjoyed focusing on psychology of the workplace, so industrial organizational psychology, and ended up working in recruiting for the first 5 years after graduating, which I loved, because you really got down to what motivated people, intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and how to build up a person's portfolio so that when they do enter the workforce, they have certain certifications. So I really enjoyed recruiting. It was my first kind of foray into the working world, and psychology certainly helped me. My degree in psychology helped me establish that foothold, I suppose.
Interesting. As you were talking about intrinsic motivation, I mean, my PhD, which I recently completed, also looked at this idea of how to motivate and create positive sentiment in agile software development teams. And so I brought a lot of the sort of human factors, social sciences type of research thinking into a typically sort of sciences-based engineering field, and just started to uncover, some of those human dynamics of, teams working, in sort of entrepreneurial, creative environments, building, software and software products, etc. And just those aspects I found to be, so important for team environments, particularly working in agile principles, etc. So I related a lot to what you were talking there about the, the intrinsic versus the extrinsic motivators. I don't know if you read Daniel Pink's book.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, Daniel Pink. I'll think of the title just now, but he talks a lot about the power of intrinsic motivation. Okay, so I mean, and I think, a lot of people, as you say, at that early age, in one's life, still not 100% sure, and often only much later in life you really zero in on what you want to do. And I guess that's not a bad thing, that you chose the generalist route and you got out there and you sort of made progress, and that gave you some space, I guess, to experiment and find what it is that you wanted to do sort of more of. And I guess you had a very interesting working, life, and, spending time in the military and settling down in your family and so on. And I really just wanted to unpack your recent qualifications and find out more about that, and see, how sort of 20 years later, I guess that's a lot clearer for you now in terms of what you wanted to study.
Absolutely. And I will say that although, oh my gosh, when I look at it, I'm like, I've been out of school since 1999. And here I am with these young graduates who are 23, 25, 28, maybe working for 5 years or having just graduated in the same class that I'm in. But I will say there's a huge benefit to having, I think, life experience, because you a lot of times come with a different perspective, or a life perspective. So you can say, well, not that you want to be that annoying person going, well, when I was 25.
Exactly.
But applying, because obviously graduate studies, I find it a lot easier than undergraduate, because I think they treat you as adults. So they give you a task, this is what you need to do, and you complete it in the amount of time necessary to do it. And it's a lot of Socratic discussions, and it's a lot of application to real world problems. And I think because I've been in the real world, I can take a lot of the reading that we're doing, which right now is society, basically it's the psychology of sustainability. So how do we get people to yes? And how do we apply various frameworks and theories and methods in proposing ideas on how to change behaviors and habits? So I absolutely love this. It's a lot of theoretical thinking. It's a lot of expanding, I think, the way that I've written in a long time. My job basically the last 5 years was a problem solver, was customer service. It was writing letters of, I hear you, I see this. And so this is a very different way of writing that I'm now doing. And I've had to basically take off my problem solving hat and put on my academic hat. And but I am thoroughly enjoying it. And, to be honest, it was very nerve-wracking. When I applied and I got in, because it was a very short, truncated amount of time that I did this. And so going in, it was kind of a death of the ego, because I had, you kind of see yourself in your world context of who you are and where you are and what you've achieved. And, the pandemic obviously affected the travel industry very much. So I was furloughed in May, and so I kind of was lost, because I've had this job for the last 16 years. It's who I identified as. It's who I thought of myself as being there for the next 15 years. So when that happened, I really wanted to explore various options, and I thought it was a perfect opportunity to understand what sustainability is, how to apply it to the travel industry, because the future has to be sustainable for us to continue as a country and as a planet. And so I wanted to be able to learn the verbiage, the language, and how to apply what we're learning into everyday aspects of business life. And so taking time off, I'm still freelancing for various small companies, but taking the time off to really focus on the studying has really given me a look into what I want to do and what I want to achieve. And it's very exciting, and I'm really enjoying it. And I was always an okay academic. Like, I always did fine in school. I loved certain subjects, and I got A's in geography and English. And other subjects, I was like, meh, in high school. I'm okay if I pass. But I think maturity has really helped me look at this from more of a distant perspective of what am I going to do to achieve the best I can, to be the best person I can. And so I've really achieved in this, like, to get no less than 93%. Like, I really am focused on doing a thorough job, writing my articles, writing my papers, acing my tests. And I think that comes down to maturity and time, honestly.
That's incredible. So you're saying you're getting 93% now on your academic record?
Yes, yeah. So I was like, wow, I've actually, I mean, I knew that I was, an okay student. I'm like, and then it's great, because the way the grading is, it kind of shows you where you're at compared to the rest of the class. It's like a sliding scale. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm doing pretty good here.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. I mean, it's amazing what 2 decades of life experience, as you say, and the perspective it can give you really brings in terms of when you're now focused and what you want to get out of it. And that just, that perspective of being, I suppose, further on in life and knowing what you want to do, it really is fantastic when it comes together in such a great example of student success. And I'm sure that our listeners today, they're going to either be at that early stage and maybe, still not sure what they want to do, or maybe a little bit later on in life. And I think, your story is just such an encouragement for everybody at any stage of their life, and whether they're considering doing studies or not. And I think this year has given a lot of people, just that opportunity, as you say, to go and do some studying and get some more perspective on life, and, get the learnings from the academic world that you can then, as you say, continue to apply into the world around us. I want to hear more about this theory of, or maybe it's more of a theory or an application or a sort of framework, etc. But getting people to yes. I mean, that just sounds like just such an interesting. Is that based on some literature? Is it something that you've created or learned or read about? Maybe just give us a little bit of sense of that and the application to the real world. And are you doing some research around that? You said you were reading some articles, etc.
Yeah, so the class that I'm taking right now is basically the social environment of sustainability. And so it's from a psychological and social studies perspective. And so, you know, the world of sustainability is relatively new. Obviously, people have been very pro-environmental for a long time, but sustainability isn't just about the environment. It's about social justice, environmental justice. It's about obviously the triple bottom line, as people like to say, people, profit, and the planet. And it's about equity. And so not just focusing on the environment, but focusing on ways people can interact with the environment and the economy and the planet to create a healthy and sustainable way to continue to live, or a better way to live. And so the class I'm taking is actually a bit groundbreaking within Lipscombe University. This is the first time they've actually done this, and we have 3 instructors, one from the social sciences, one from more the counseling psychiatric background, and then one who's his degree is in earth sciences, so very scientific background. And you know, we're looking at both psychological frameworks as well as social studies frameworks on. And it's interesting because I think maybe the oldest study is 10 years old, and the newest study that we're looking at is 2018, 2019. So in all of the studies, they say, you know, we need to look at this more longitudinally. We need to have follow-up studies because the information is still so new and so fresh. So it's exciting. I mean, we are applying frameworks that are already established to sustainability. And you were talking about intrinsic motivation, and we were just, one of the articles we read looked at basically it's about empowerment and choices, it's about feedback, and it's about motivation. And so whether you're talking about getting someone to recycle their cardboard or to, you know, not to buy a new car every 2 years, you know, how do we get people to change their behavior? And so what's also interesting, and this is just a side note, is Lipscombe University is a small private faith-based university. And so besides the scientific side of sustainability, which my last 2 classes were on, it's also interesting because it's about faith-based, and how do you apply your faith to as a sustainable graduate. And so we have people from various faiths within the graduate program who are very involved in their communities back home. So we have a couple of guys who follow Islam from Kenya. We have a Catholic priest from Italy, and then we have quite a lot of Christian faith-based people in our program. And so their focus is also, how do we use our faith to get to yes? So we can do it from a scientific point of view. And then obviously it's also quite a conservative university. And so how do we look at, without scaring people as liberals, how do we get people to also look at it from a conservative side of, you know, why is public transportation important? And learning the vocabulary is part of the degree, because when you can talk to somebody in their own language or in their own perspective and help them understand why this is important, they feel a lot less threatened, and then you've achieved half your goal.
Incredible. That is just incredibly interesting, Michelle. I can see that. I mean, it's just such a wonderful opportunity to now get to grips with this brand new thinking, and to hopefully now help evolve it and be part of it, I suppose. You know, that's also the exciting aspect, I think, of more the postgraduate level studies, is to be part of co-creating the next evolution of thinking or frameworks or theory and practice, I suppose. So really interesting to hear about all of that. And so now you obviously still, you know, you've got your 3 kids, your 3 dogs, your military spouse. I see on Facebook, you know, obviously your husband, obviously, I mean, he's obviously on tour every now and again, but, you know, how do you balance, you know, the home life and the studying, and then you've got your freelancing, you know, so give us a sense of, you know, a day in the life of Michelle, and how the academic studies sort of fits into all of that.
Sure. Well, I have my coffee, as I'm sure so many of us do, but I really try and put, like, I have my list behind me, but I'm very good at following, like, A, B, C, D. Let me check this off. Let me check this off. So I generally try and do 2 to 3 hours a day of reading and research for my papers that I'm writing, and really try and carve that time out. My kids luckily are in school in person. I think it would be a very big challenge if they were virtual. So I am very blessed with that aspect of where we're at right now. And then I work between 10 to 15 hours on my freelance job. And then when I get a chance, I clean the house and do the other mom stuff. But I have a very supportive husband. So, you know, we have a great partnership. And so that he's very supportive of me going to school right now. Most of the time I do spend, I think, the majority of the time writing my papers on the weekends, just because I have a lot more freedom, you know, during that time. I will say that I probably should have known, but the amount of reading that goes into graduate school, it's incredible. And I've always been an avid reader, but normally it's my choice of fiction and some romantic sub story. But you know, when you're like, oh, I have 7 articles, which are minimum of 22 pages each, and I have to write a, you know, 7.5-page paper on them, that's a lot of time that you have to figure out. And so, you know, I think I try and figure out a balance, and I try and put school work away when the kids come home. But my classes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 to 9. So that's, you know, luckily my husband's really great about taking care of the kids and putting them to bed and stuff. So
yeah, that's great. So those of you listening on the podcast now, if you're watching on YouTube, yes, you can see behind Michelle there. She's got her notice board and her calendar and her kids' drawings, and it's just lovely to see, you know, the life of a student and the balance that she's been talking about and how that goes in sort of practically speaking. But if you're listening online, you on the podcast, you won't have the benefit of that. But I can tell you, it really looks like Michelle is very organized, and she's got her life set up, and you know, she's sort of got everything in the right place, which is absolutely fantastic. And I guess, Michelle, you know, when those reading assignments sort of come out, and you know, yes, I think if you're studying in an area that you're really passionate about, then it's going to be almost enjoyable to get through those articles, and so that's a positive thing. But I think, you know, then students do underestimate the volume of it and the amount of time that it does just take to get through that amount of literature and other research. And maybe just give us a sense of, you know, now that you've kind of got into a rhythm of going through these articles and applying them and so on and so forth. And I mean, I find that, you know, reading articles, it's wonderful because it's very structured and there's a pattern and there's an abstract and a different sections and so on. And so, and that's great because you've got that universal approach to academic research, you know, which helps us all zero in on the ones that are important and then scan over the ones that are not so important, but we sort of file them away mentally or in some sort of source library, and we can always go back to them if we need them. So what's your approach to, as you say, getting through that high volume of literature and then getting quick access to the ones that you need to make reference to at a later point?
So the way that our the papers that we write 2 papers a week. So the large ones are on Sunday and the shorter ones are on Wednesday. Basically, they've asked us 3 to 5 questions that we need to answer per paper. So they really want us to get into the papers, even the ones that we're not necessarily interested in. We still have to somehow refer the paper or relate it back to our personal life or include it in our viewpoint of what we want to do with sustainability. So basically what I do is I have the 5 questions that I need to answer per article that I'm reading. And then I read through the abstract, and then where I think that I want to answer, whether it's the hypothesis or whether it's the conclusion or whether we're looking at the various methods, I'll then kind of skip to those parts, read the important part, and then jot down notes on each question. So what gets me excited about sustainability? What do I think would be difficult to apply this research to in real life? And what do I, and I think the third one is what surprised me about the article. And so a lot of times I'll, you know, reference past articles that we've read. I'll look at whether I think the framework can actually work in reality. Are we looking at, because a lot of times I think, and maybe you can, and I'm sure it's quite, well, I guess it really depends on who you're reading, but a lot of these articles are written in application to the Western world, right? First world issues. And so a lot of times the frameworks are not necessarily on a worldwide scale. And so having the background of living in South Africa and traveling the world, you know, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I think the professor's always like, oh, Michelle, she's on her little soapbox, is this is fantastic, but unless you have, you know, reached your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like none of this is applicable. And if we're trying to be equitable and achieve sustainability around the whole world, we have to look at who needs it the most? And so fantastic that everyone is trying to change their behavior by buying technology that turns light off at a certain time and can regulate the temperature in your house. But if you don't have electricity, how are you going to apply that? So, you know, I try and apply real life experiences that I've had in my own life. A lot of times they want you to focus on what you plan to do after you graduate. So if there's something that I can look at within the responsible travel realm, within sustainable travel, regenerative travel, I try and take those out of the article and jot them down. And then when I'm writing the paper, I'm able to kind of synthesize the literature that I've focused on.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, your experience in the travel industry, I suppose, gives you that lens and the experience that you can use to filter out the useful and the practical aspects from the research. Because as you say, it's only when you come with that, you know, worldwide experience or some sort of background and context that you can actually sift through and filter the, you know, what's really useful. And in the sustainability context, as you say, sometimes, you know, some of those are more of a luxury. And I mean, the many people in the world today are surviving on $1 a day, and it's, you know, the sustainability of the world and the next generation, unfortunately, doesn't stack up as high as just finding the next meal. You know, for, you know, and so it's great that you sort of blending all of those aspects together, which is great. And then Michelle, I mean, just so, okay, reading and getting through the papers, and I think I'm very similar to you. You know, I'll sort of scan and I've got the abstracts, and I can always go back in and I can, you know, really flag the ones that will be useful for me later. But then now the writing process, I mean, you know, so for me, I've always tried to link writing and reading, and when I, you know, coach students and I trying to help people be successful at postgraduate level, you know, you got to read and write almost iteratively, and then thinking finds expression in your writing, which is informed by your reading as well. So your writing process, and is that enjoyable for you? And do you have specific practices and techniques? And do you find a good time of day to write, or a certain environment within which you can write better, or with people in a writing retreat, for example? Just give us your thoughts on good writing habits.
Sure. You know, I've always enjoyed writing. In fact, English was my #1 subject with Mrs. White back in Greenside High School. I loved it.
Do you remember? Indeed.
Yep. And so I've actually always written, and you know, I keep a journal. I've written articles for my company, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's never been a struggle for me. I think a lot of times what I do find more of a challenge is just taking ideas or what the paper's written, and then putting it into words that I can process, because a lot of times it's very scientific based, or it's and it's not natural to me to write like that. So what I try and do is how I write, which I believe that I write very fluently. I mean, there's never been any commentary from my instructors on, you know, you need to change this, or so I try and make it flow as much as possible, and I write. I have Grammarly, which is a fantastic, I really highly encourage that for any grad students out there who are looking for a program to help you, because I think my biggest challenge is I write in passive voice a lot of times. And so it's great because I don't need it to help me. And now that I see it, I then rethink of the sentence, and then I put it into the active voice. So it's just more now, rather than utilizing it as a tool, it's more of a reminder, okay, I'm doing this. And so I try and make it flow as naturally as possible. Obviously, my normal writing style is informal, especially when I'm communicating with the clients and you know, hi, how are you doing? I just wanted to inform you of this. So I've had to kind of rethink on how I write in academia. And so it's a lot more, I suppose, a lot more formal is how I write now. But I've never really thought of that question. It just kind of comes out my brain and into my fingers, and then I start typing away. But as you said, you know, previously, I'd like to put bullet points of ideas, and then from those ideas, I go back into the research and I look at some of the, you know, some of the ideas that the researchers have put in place, and then I apply it to what I think, and then put it into paragraphs. I don't know if that's the right answer.
No,
but
it's excellent. No, well, Michelle, I mean, I think, you know, writing, certainly in my experience, and I think, you know, in South Africa, where many students are writing in English as a second language, you know, so one, and all the writing workshops that I've written over the years, you know, I mean, one's got to be very aware of that, and I always break down this perception that academic writing should be complex or difficult to understand. You must write to be understood, write with your reader in mind, etc. And so I really just wanted to just explore a couple of things that you said. So the first one, just make it clear for our listeners now, Grammarly, which you mentioned as a tool, how does that work? And I mean, you obviously have adapted it to suit yourself, and maybe I know that it gives you all the tips and makes suggestions, but it just prompts you to change from passive to active voice, etc. What else does it do, and how do you set it up, and how does it work, etc., to help you write better?
Sure. So you can set it up to be, oops, sorry, my dog just pushed in. You can set it up to be academic, formal, informal in your writing. So there's various levels that you can have it as far as when it reviews what you're writing. It also looks at spelling, it looks at your punctuation, and it'll tell you, hey, you left a comma out here, or this paragraph is way too long, or you need to reword the sentence because it makes absolutely no sense. So it's really a tool, and it sits alongside. You can embed it into your Google Docs or your Word or whatever you're working with. You can also include it in your email system. And so basically it'll just be on the top of your top space, I guess your bar at the top, as an application that is integrated into your whatever you're writing on, whether it's Word or, as I said, Google Docs. And then you can have it on, or you can just have it, you know, circling on the bottom. And then once you're done writing, a lot of times I'll then turn it on and I'll then go through it and I'll rewrite the passive voice. But when it is a passive voice, it'll just basically notify you that it's a passive voice. Or if you've used one word excessively, it'll say, this word has been used multiple times, try a different word. So you can use it as much as you want. You can use it to just kind of guide you and give you prompts and tips. I've just found it as almost like having a writing tutor next to me going, you can improve it this way, or this is well done, but try and think of another way to word it. So I really enjoyed having it along, and in the beginning I used it, I'd say, more than I do now, because now I think it actually helped me write better.
Wow, that's brilliant. I mean, so I think a couple of points that you mentioned there around just, you know, over repetition of certain words. I see that a lot, you know, in the writing that I coach with my students. And then, like you mentioned earlier, just getting out of the passive voice and into the active voice. And I mean, just to break that principle down, and something that, you know, I sort of help students with a lot, is to make sure that the subjects of your sentence are really very practical and tangible. And, you know, ironically, as you say, we learned English at school, but then we kind of forget about it all when we get into university, and we think we have to write these long, complicated, high-minded sentences, and a subject must be, you know, noun, place, person, and just so that you can really understand it's in an active voice. And then the verb, you know, we tend to nominalize verbs. We tend to clutter our sentences with a lot of prepositions, and that's because, you know, we often write in the passive or second or third person, as opposed to just tell the story, explain to your reader, make the main thing the main thing. You know, so that basics of clear and simple writing, I think, is something that, you know, is so important to bear in mind as an academic writer. And often then your contribution becomes greater, because your contribution comes through what people read about your own research and your studies.
And I've also learned that I tend to flourish my sentences. And the other thing is, and it's nice because obviously it's a robot, so it's not saying, you know, a red circle by your instructor saying this is incorrect, because by grad school they expect to be writing in a academic sense. So what I like about it is it will say, you know, you don't need to include personally, I believe. You can just say, I believe. It's just clear, it's concise. You don't have to make it fluffy and pretty. Describe what you want to say in as few words as possible, and while really getting your idea across. And so I really appreciate it, and it's helped me write better.
Yeah, that padding I see, and we're all guilty of it. But what I really liked, you know, is that you've got this assistant editor sitting right there, and it's automated, and it uses artificial intelligence. And I really love those tools because it helps. And as long as you get used to them and use them in ways that, you know, help your writing, it can be very important. But I think your mindset that you're talking about now is being your own editor. You know, I find some people, they don't have that built into their writing process. You know, they'll either try and write too perfectly the first time, and then they never get anything down on the page, or they write too casually and informally, and they never go back and fix it, you know, for their reader, for their supervisor, for their examiner, for their lecturer, etc. You know, so I've just been very passionate about the writing process over the years, and I found that it's made my studies and my academic journey just, you know, that much more enjoyable. So yeah, just great to hear your thoughts on how that works. So Michelle, looking ahead now, I mean, how long, you know, just give us a sense of, you know, your studies the next sort of few months or year. Where do you want to take this? Do you want to now come up with the next big theory of sustainability and sort of help write the Green Deal? What's your take on it?
Oh, it's so exciting. There's so much for the future of sustainability, and that's what gets me so excited about being in this field. So my next spring semester, I'm taking 4 classes, which is quite a big load, but I'm going to be doing basically energy. So looking at future's energy. So solar power, wind power versus what we currently rely on now, which obviously is oil and gas. We're going to be doing water management, which I think will be very interesting. Applied sustainability, which is probably what I'm most passionate about. And then lastly, I believe that I am doing, buildings. So I'm also really excited about basically construction and building and LEED certification. So the nice thing is within our graduate programs, we also are able to get various certifications through the classes we're taking. And so I'm excited about the building side of and construction. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be taking a LEED certification. I'm more interested in what's called well building, which is a newer certification, which looks at more of the internal life of a building. And so mitigating issues on buildings that were constructed 50, 60 years ago, looking at toxicology, reducing toxic paint, lead paint, asbestos, etc. But also just how to create a sustainable place where you live, work, and stay. So I'm hoping to apply that to the hotels that I would like to work with in the future. The problem in the hospitality industry is everyone wants to be sustainable. Everyone wants that accreditation. They want to, but there's a lot of greenwashing that takes place. And so I think if we could create a pathway for hotels, not just on the LEED certification side, which basically looks at energy and design, but also on the way it treats the local communities, the way hotels treat their employees, whether we do farm to table, basically a holistic way of looking at a hotel as a functional area of sustainability. So I'm very passionate about that, and that's where ultimately I'd love to see myself either as a consultant or working for a corporation. So I graduate in December 2021, which will be here very, very soon. This summer, I'm going to be spending some time up in Vermont, again, with the program. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes fine with the pandemic and we can get up there in person. But Vermont is one of the states that has some of the best environmentally friendly, sustainable designs and programs. And so they're one of the lead states in the US as far as sustainability goes. So we actually get to spend 10 days up there with various projects, meeting with the people who design the projects, who are leading the projects. So that'll be really exciting. And then I also get to do what's called a capstone project, which is Lipscombe's version of a thesis, of a master's thesis. And so, but it's a little bit more real life applicable. So I'm very interested in creating standards within the hospitality industry, because right now everyone says, well, I'm green, or I'm responsible, or I'm regenerative, or I'm sustainable, but what does that mean? And so without having actual standards to measure people by, or to say, you're a level 4 or you're a level 2, and this is how you get to level 4, and this is what you need to do. So that's something I'm very interested in, and I think something that the hospitality industry would probably, and the tourism industry really would benefit from.
And writing up that capstone project, as you called it, or I guess as a thesis, I mean, is that going to then involve sort of a large-ish writing project, or sort of, you know, bringing it all together and out of which you could then sort of make a written contribution to the field?
Yes, so obviously there'll be a proposal that I'll put together, which I'll submit to my adjudicator, and then from there we'll work together on, I'll probably be interviewing a lot of people within the field. I'll actually be writing I'm actually not too sure of the exact requirements, but I know that that's kind of the start, because in this class right now we're putting together a proposal on a change of a particular behavior we'd like to see change within this within our world. And so this is kind of a good start. And then, but I could probably get back to you a little bit more about what those requirements are, because we haven't quite discussed them yet. But basically, yeah, it's a proposal, and then how we're actually going to achieve it and ways to achieve it.
No, that's interesting, Michelle. And I mean, just, interesting that you mentioned proposals, because it's, a big topic that people have to get through and an important milestone. And this our discussion now will sort of air sometime during the middle of next year, but early in January, I've actually already lined up a webinar for a whole bunch of students to get together and talk about writing proposals and understand what that sort of process looks like, and what how important it is for a proposal in terms of setting up as a foundation for your study rather than just a tick box. And if you can get your proposal on a sound footing, then you've already done a lot of the work ahead of that thesis, and you'll have a good narrow thesis statement within which you can then do your research, gather your data, do the analysis, and then link back to those research questions that you stated early on in the proposal. So getting that right, I think, is just going to be so important for your student success. But you sound absolutely passionate and convinced, and you've got that field trip in the diary, and hopefully that comes through, and that'll give you a real tangible experience of the issues that you're going to be writing about. And then, Michelle, I guess last thought, have you been talking at any conferences, or writing in any peer-reviewed journals, or is that maybe something a little bit further down the track, or something you as you kind of get credibility as a consultant in your industry with this qualification behind you, is that something that's encouraged, or something that you would consider doing at some point?
Absolutely. I'm really enjoying it. So I'm hoping, our professors are very interested in getting us wonderful jobs within the local economy of Nashville. So, and they're very interested in helping us to achieve whatever we wanting to achieve. And, in the initial discussion with Professor Galbraith, who's my adjudicator, or my counselor, we did various tests. We looked at kind of how I relate to the world, and where I focus, and what I'm best at and what I'm not really good at. And I love communicating, and I love speaking, and I would love to be a presenter at a conference. And so I certainly do see that in my future. As far as writing goes, I'm more than happy to submit some of my writing pieces to various journals, or even sustainability newsletters. I just need to figure out which ones I want to submit. And then, it's definitely something I'm very open to. I haven't had an opportunity yet, I think, just because I've really just started in August. And so I'm just getting started, but it's certainly something that our professors encourage. And, I'm sure that if I approached them and said, I'd like to do something, they would open doorways for me.
And often, I guess, you would co-author, something with your supervisor. And I mean, I guess, as a student, we would do probably the bulk of the work, and they would, sort of edit it and kind of approve it and add something to it and have their name on it as well. And that's, I guess, how it works. And, as we get a few more of those articles under our belt, we just increase, our credibility in the industry that we're contributing to. So great to hear that that's sort of on your radar. And one of the things I do find, and maybe sort of perhaps more at the PhD level, but students sort of get quite tired by the time they finished, and it's been a long, drawn-out process, and it's taken a lot longer and a lot more effort and time than they had actually initially planned for, and they get that final report in, and that's the last that they want to do on that topic, because it's taken so long, it's been so hard for them, and they don't have the energy or the headspace to then go and do a separate article or speak at a conference, etc. And I think it's a missed opportunity, because the reality is, you'll put a lot of effort into your thesis or final report, but that really is for your examiners and your supervisors. You have to extract from that into a journal or a conference to make an actual contribution, which is then a slightly different writing style. It's a slightly different angle. It's part of a newsletter. It's part of a journal or a special edition on a specific topic, which your work might be quite relevant to, but which you then just have to slightly reposition and angle in a different way, possibly than the core of your study, etc. So just fantastic that you're already thinking about that and putting that on your list to get to at some point. But Michelle, it's been such an inspiring, and maybe your dog needs to be fed. That's why they've come in and opened the door behind you. So if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see, but Michelle's dog has sort of walked behind and opened the door, possibly as a reminder that he or she is hungry. So Michelle, you possibly have some duties to get to, and I just do want to say thank you very much for your time, and so wonderful to see you again after 20 years. And I do certainly remember our English teacher at Greenside High, and certainly Mrs. White gave us a love of the language, which I think both you and I have extended well beyond Greenside High School, and perhaps would, I think, make her very proud of having remembered her as, you know, the sort of person that encouraged us to stick to it over all these many years. So Michelle, thank you. And any last thoughts for students and people out there, and just words of encouragement to keep going and stay on the track, I guess?
I'll say that, you know, life is honestly what you make it. If you're given opportunities to go back to school, no matter your age, absolutely take it. Sometimes you only figure out what you want to do as a grown-up when you are a grown-up. And so don't be afraid to explore, and you know, never let your ego get in the way. Sometimes it's scary doing something, and change is good. It's just the in-between time that's a little bit woo.
Michelle, thank you. I love that. Life is what you make of it. So to our listeners, absolutely. And you can, you know, study and research, you know, whatever it is to your heart's desire. And we've heard about sustainability and the wonderful things that Michelle is doing, and whatever, you know, you want to go and study, just get out there, take those opportunities, make the most of it. Remember to write, remember to apply, you know, the tips and tricks you've learned in this interview and the other, you know, insights that Michelle has given us. So Michelle, appreciate the time. Have a good day further, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the show when you've graduated next year. As you said, it'll be here before you know it. So good luck and well done.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.